Hello, welcome to Punchline Talks, the big interview sponsored by Infostar IT Solutions. I'm Mark Owen, editor and owner of punchlineglossy.com. And today, my special guest is Alex Bomberg, owner and founder of Intelligent Protection International Limited. Welcome, Alex. Welcome to Punchline Talks.
Thank you very much for having me on, Mark. Thank you.
Can you tell us, please, can you tell us all about the business? Intelligent Protection International Limited, special security, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I go back a little bit. So I started a company, my first company in 2002, and that company was an intelligence company providing intelligence services globally, based here in Gloucestershire, but providing it globally. And we found I think by 2008 and 9, we split the company into the group structure that it is, and intelligent protection was the physical protection arm of that, because we just found that we were just doing too much as one company. It was just the lines were getting a bit blurred with the marketing of the company and the physical offerings. So we split it up into a group structure. So intelligent protection, as I said, deals with all the physical protection. So clients can range from government departments, royal families, ultra high net worth individuals, corporations, and individuals. So there's a massive wide range of clients, with 80% of our work being outside of the UK.
To be honest about it, it's a more dangerous world than ever. And people are looking for that protection, especially if you've got a name or you're a celebrity or you're a footballer. I mean, everybody is kind of watched as well. It's a worrying world, isn't it? So, how do they find you guys, and how do you pick the clients as well in a way? Do you say actually I'm not happy to work with you? How does it work, Alex?
So we definitely vet clients. Absolutely. You've got to carry out your due diligence. We get a lot of people who are politically exposed persons, which should we say, from around the world, that come to us for protection. And it's not always a good fit. So we do our due diligence and, check them out. And sometimes we do say no. In relation to how people find us, so I'm quite lucky. So last week I was in the Daily Telegraph talking about the famous tennis player Emma Raducanu, who was in Dubai, and she was having a stalking incident in Dubai. A stalker's been pestering her for a while. So I was talking in the Daily Telegraph about that, and about what the Dubai authorities would be doing about it. I'm quite lucky. So I'm also, as well as being a resident of Gloucestershire, I'm also a resident of Dubai. So I live out there a bit as well. So only just received my residency actually, which is quite handy. But so yeah, so I'm quite well known in the industry, all over LinkedIn. Obviously, networking is a massive part of what we do. So quite lucky to have good exposure internationally, really.
Sort of dangerous job, is it? And what sort of people do you generally, deal with? Or is it mainly celebrities? Is it, heads of government? And how many people do you employ? And what's the turnover of the company?
So worldwide, it's a bit of a mixed bag, really, because mostly we use contractors because of the type of work it is. If you want somebody who speaks French and Russian, a bodyguard who speaks French and Russian, we can supply that. So it's up and down throughout the year. One minute we can have 10 people deployed, the next minute we've got hundreds of people employed. It is a real mixed bag. So, for instance, we were in charge of part of the security for the Commonwealth Games for the British government. So we did that in Birmingham a few years ago, and that was quite a big operation. So operations can be two or three people or one person, all the way up to a couple of hundred people for a short period of time. And obviously they all depend on length as well. They're very, very, each task is different. For instance, this week we're running a big task in India for a US client. So it's absolutely global. And as you said, it's the world that we're living in now is pretty scary.
When you from dodging from one country to the other and the different sort of religious elements, the different types of I don't know, even basic things like roadworks and things, and the way the traffic runs. But as an intelligence officer and someone who has to oversee someone's safety, that is quite well, it's a massive daunting task. Where do you begin? If you're going off to India.
It's not actually as difficult, so as you might think. So, for instance, we carry out full security risk assessments for our clients. So we would as soon as we get the job in, as part of the planning of the job, we would look at where they're going, what they're doing, their full itinerary. We would look at any associated risks. So it could be, it might not even be what you think about. It could be health risks. It could be the fact that there's going to be a general strike. There could be industrial action in the city at that time. So it's a million and one things. It's not. Most people think, tsunamis. They think diseases, but there's a whole raft of things that might upset that job. And whilst some things are not necessarily security related, they soon can be. For instance, if you're taking somebody out into the desert of Mauritania in North Africa, and they're not well, and they don't tell you they're not well, and you have to come back, during twilight, that can become a security issue. So you've got to cover everything. So we supply drivers, we supply medics, we do the full security risk assessment as part of the planning. There's a whole raft of things that go into making a trip for somebody safe, and it could be a family holiday in Egypt for high net worth individuals. Could be a royal honeymoon, which we've done around the Caribbean and around the world for members of the Saudi royal family. It could be a business trip to the Middle East or to Africa or to South America. It could be a whole wide range of things, but there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just about rocking up with big blokes in suits or
Talk
women
about those,
in suits.
talk about big people or strong people or whatever in suits. What type of person makes a really good security guard? Is it ex-military or ex-policeman? What kind of person are you looking for?
So it was again a wide range of people, really, depending on who the client is. We've got big people, small people, but I think we as a company, we specialize in multilingual operatives, and there's a lot of vetting that goes in place for somebody to come on board with us. There's a lot of close protection officers around the world who just wouldn't fit with us as a company, because we're not after, knuckle draggers. We're after people that can make dynamic decisions on the ground. Because at the end of the day, with all the best planning in the world, when that operative is on the ground with a client, it's that operative that makes the decisions. They've got to make the dynamic decisions there and then what to do. And I always say, there's no such thing as a bad decision. You've just got to make the decision, and we can talk about it afterwards, because it's all very well me sat in Gloucestershire or Dubai or wherever I may be trying to criticize something that somebody on the ground has made a decision to do. When you're talking about someone's safety, that's a really, really big thing. I mean, I've personally operated in some of the most dangerous places in the world. A few years ago, I was operating in Haiti with a client, and that was a very, very sensitive job, a very personal job to her and her family. And Haiti is the most dangerous place in the world.
I was going to say Haiti, Afghanistan, all these places. Belize, I don't know about you, I'm ex-forces as well. That's pretty dodgy. I mean, you must see some pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, you do see some scary stuff, but I think you don't numb to it, but it becomes a norm to you. It becomes quite normal to operate. Most people, the average business person's probably operating all the time at between 5 and 8, with their personal risk appetite and their stress levels. We operate a lot higher than that. We're right up there. So it is scary, but you've got a job to do, and that's why the planning is just so important. Because although they say, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy, that's quite true. But as long as you've got some plans, you'll do well. And also, what we find with a lot of incidents that happen, the more used you get to doing this type of work, you'll come across something which won't be exactly the same as the last problem, but it will have the same elements. So you know how to deal with it. I mean, it could be a really difficult client. It could be that you're doing a photo shoot in Paris with a client, and they want to go to an area which you haven't recce. They just change their mind. clients do that all the time. So they change their mind. They want to go to an area in Paris which is unsafe, and they want to, and they're leaving it late in the day. It's starting to, you're starting to lose light and stuff like that. So you've got to be mature as well. You've got to be mature enough to be able to have that conversation with a client that, you know, this is we can't do this, or we shouldn't be doing this. This is what we need to do. And so going back to who we employ and why, we employ guys who can have that, or guys and girls who can have that conversation, who are brave enough and brazen enough to know their job and to be able to turn around to a client and not be intimidated by the client. Doesn't matter how famous they are. You've got to be able to have the maturity to do that. So, it's that sort of element is important when we employ people.
So, what's the most not dangerous job, Alex, but the most interesting job that you've ever worked on?
Um, we work on lots of interesting jobs. The most interesting job that we've worked on was, oh gosh, you put me on the spot there, really. I think where we've worked for people, and it started off as a 1 day or 2 day job, and it turned into something completely different because they started opening up to us. We worked for a very wealthy Asian gentleman in London a couple of years ago, and it turned out that he lied to us when he first engaged with us and wasn't honest about why he wanted the security, and then it turned out he was being blackmailed. So we were able to help him with that, help advise him, and give him and his family the right advice, and put him onto the right legal firms and things like that. So I mean, it's difficult because a lot of people come to us when they're in crisis mode, and they're not always honest. So I always say that the most difficult conversation is the most honest conversation about about your family security. And it is conversations about security are difficult for people, especially if they're being blackmailed or, under pressure, in stress.
And I
People
was going
don't
to say,
always.
if you're dealing with very powerful people as well, very wealthy people or celebrities that are used to getting their own way, that must be quite difficult to persuade them to actually listen to you. But I suppose that's why they've hired you in the first place. But that doesn't always mean that's the case.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, so I'm quite lucky because in my early days, I was exposed to very high-powered people. I worked for the royal family for a little while, and I'm not intimidated by anyone really. It doesn't matter about how much money they've got. We've worked for, the Brunei royal family. We've worked for the royal families across North Africa and the Middle East. I'm really, I'll have a conversation and I will be brutally honest. And I think these people really respect that. And a lot of people can't do it. A lot of people can't bring themselves to being brutally honest because they're too frightened of losing the client. But you've got to be honest when it comes to security. I mean, we come across a lot of high net worth families in the UK and around the world who they've just been sold rubbish by other security companies or advised badly. And then you end up with what we call as the security bias. And that's where they don't want security necessarily anymore, or they don't want to engage with security at the level that they should and be honest and open because they've had such a bad experience in the past. And so by speaking openly and honestly with them, you can save them money and you can save a lot of time and a lot of aggro. And you've got to be able to have that honest conversation because they've got to be able to come to you when they've got problems. Otherwise, that ends up a problem, if you understand what I mean now.
You get into this job then, Alex. How did you actually start the business? I know you're ex-military, and I'm going to bring up your photograph now, if that's okay with you. Hopefully, you'll be able to see this. Share, there we go. Oh, can you see that photograph of yourself?
There we go. Yeah, that's a younger version of myself that was taken in Bosnia. So that's about 1994, 95.
Yeah, nasty, nasty war. A lot of people don't realise how bad it actually got. How long were you in there for?
So I was with the the RGBW, the Royal Gloucestershire Berkshire Wiltshire Regiment. We were there for a 6-month tour. I'm sure a lot of your listeners remember the Gloucesters, as were amalgamated with the Royal Berkshire Wiltshire Regiment in 1993. So this is a year after we amalgamated. We all went to Bosnia, and it was a tough tour. It's a tough tour. We lost a few of our colleagues there, so that tour will always be in our memories, really.
That's right. And there's nothing, well, nothing really prepares you for that kind of loss as well, even though they say you're all trained for it. I mean, how long were you in the army for?
So I did 6 years in the army. I could have done longer, and a lot of my friends did do longer, but it wasn't the army wasn't really for me. I'm a great questioner. I'm somebody who likes to ask a lot of questions, so that wasn't really well received. Um, I think people saw it as ill-disciplined, maybe that I was asking a lot of questions, and maybe they thought it was talking back. And I think looking back now, all my military reports say how intelligent I was, but they also say things like, ask too many questions, or is a barrack room lawyer. And I think really looking back, it's because I wanted to know more. I wanted to know the bigger picture. I wanted to understand. And as a private soldier in the infantry, they don't want you to do that. That's not what they want. So, I ended up in roles like commanding officer's driver. I worked in the officers' mess for a while. I was posted to work with the royal family at Kensington Palace for a year. And it was a different role for me. But yeah, I did 6 years and got out, and then I was quite lucky that I ended up working in the world of commercial intelligence straight after that.
And where was that? Was that here in the UK? Was it somewhere
So
abroad?
yeah, so I was based in the UK. So most of it was in and around London. So going through people's dustbins, doing surveillance, pattern of life studies. I got involved in eavesdropping. So electronic eavesdropping, I became a bit of an expert at that, and that's one of the things I talk a lot about now is counter espionage, and I write a lot about that.
Okay, well,
So yeah, got
let's talk,
into
sorry, Alex, let's talk about that now. Sort of the espionage sort of
sure,
side of things. Then, um,
sure. What do you want to know?
yeah. Well,
Where should we
I
start?
mean, when you think about eavesdropping, I always think about divorces actually and spying on people's wives and husbands. And is that how it started? Sort of, having
Not really for
detective kind
me. So I was involved in doing operations. I guess you would call it commercial espionage. So I was involved in the sort of the black side of that, really. So I could be tapping a telephone in Switzerland. I could be going through someone's bins in France, or surveilling someone, you know, in Germany. It was pretty much an international job. Most of it, I'd say probably 70% of it was probably London based. But as I got better and more well known in those circles, yeah, it was pretty much international. So, I mean, there are, high level divorce cases that use those tactics, of course, but for my learning of it, I cut my teeth really on the, going through the bins of law companies, for instance. So lots of London law firms going through their bins, and in the days where they used to print off a draft and they didn't shred it, they just used to bin it. Of course, no one cared about data protection and information in those days. It's a bit different now. So that was, yeah. So that's where I started, and
of.
culminated in me getting arrested for telephone tapping.
But what sort of, what sort of stuff were you looking for? In these
Um,
bank statements, solicitor statements, whatever.
Commercial. So we were looking for information regarding commercial disputes. So we'd be working for one side of the commercial dispute, and we'd be looking for information um, on that file. So any draft letters to do with that file. So we could pre-warn our clients of where the case was going, what the client was thinking.
Big case, obviously, in the Daily Mail and the Mirror and the Sun eavesdropping on people's mobiles and things like that. Did you ever get involved in any of that sort of? stuff?
No, so mobile interception. So actually, I did quite a few interviews. I think in the early 2000s about people having their mobile phone hacked. That was more to do with the voicemails, getting access. So I wasn't ever involved in that. The telephone tapping that I was involved in was landlines. So we would actually we'd use jamming equipment to jam people's mobile phones to force them to use the landline as well. So uh, we were involved in that because that was easy. You could hack someone's mobile phone. Sorry, hack someone's landline from a couple of miles away from the property. If you identified the cabinet on the side of the road that their line ran through, you could have a if you know what you're looking for, you could have a delve in there and access the line and use that. So that was what we used to do.
I mean, you must have a great deal amount of patience. You know, when they show these television programs and they've got a detective sitting outside someone's house on a case, as we say, case. I mean, I just imagine it's boring as hell because it's not like the 2 minutes that you see on TV.
Yeah.
It's
It's really tough, so it takes a special type of person to carry out that sort of work. I'm not the most patient person in the world, so for me it was awful. But something that I've learned, and we speak to, so obviously I still have an intelligence company, so we still do surveillance and intelligence work commercially around the world, and we tell clients, when we do big operations for them, we can't force the target to go and do something. We can't force the target to go to a cafe to meet somebody, or if it's somebody having an affair, we can't force them to go to a hotel room. They've got to do that. So where we get clients, especially on the commercial side of things, where we get clients say, okay, well, our budget is this, and we only want you to do it for a period of 2 weeks. Sometimes they come to us and say, well, you haven't. Why didn't you record that meeting? And very often it's because things haven't taken place. You can't force other people to do interactions. Either people are up to no good or they're not. So it becomes very difficult. So surveillance is really tough. It is really tough. It's not
turn to the
easy at
client
all.
then. You got to turn to the client and say, well, actually, we haven't found what you're looking for. Give us another 2 weeks. Give us another 2 weeks and we might find something. Do you say, well, he is a bit dodgy or she is a bit dodgy? Can you give us a
Yeah,
bit
I mean
more time?
yeah, it's difficult. It's very, very difficult because you just can't force it. I mean, we've been involved in some massive cases. We were involved in a really big commercial supply chain fraud here in the UK, and we had trackers in pallets coming from a company. It was all actually a lot of that was an interesting case because that was to do with insider threat. There was information, somebody had been sacked and had passed some commercial information across to some bad actors, and these bad actors had taken that information, worked out how to commit quite a substantive fraud against this company, supply chain fraud, and the company was shocked that this had happened. But to be honest with you, insider threat is it's a really big issue in the UK. A lot of, not just in the UK, globally, people don't realise, when you sack people, they've got they know where the skeletons are buried, and they know how your operation works inside and out. So it's very easy to commit fraud that way.
Okay, so what would you say is the number one tip then on that particular level? I always say if you're going to sack someone, Christ's sake, don't let them go back on their computer again.
Yeah, there's many things really. I think the first thing is set as a company, setting your stall out early. So having the ability to lock people out of devices, that's really important. Don't let somebody use their own device. There's a thing called Boyd, which is bring your own device. A lot of companies rely on that, and they just put the company email onto Dave or Sarah's device. But legally, Dave and Sarah own their own devices. So you can't lock them out of their own devices. So you've got to understand where you stand from a legal point of view. So you supply them with a device, you're able to monitor that device if you want to, and you're able to lock them out of that device if you have a disciplinary or you're going to sack them. So that sort of thing is really important to understand from the off. A lot of people run businesses, especially medium-sized businesses, and they don't have access to somebody like myself who can go through basic security protocols with them or help them with their policies and procedures. And this is where they start getting into trouble. That company then gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And unfortunately, they don't have the right advice. And it's very difficult to go into a growing company, a company that's expanding quite quickly in some areas, and start trying to change the culture. Because this is a lot of this is a cultural thing. It's not necessarily about going into a company and making that company spend millions of pounds on security. I can take your money, but that's being dishonest, because actually most security is about individuals and it's about creating a culture, and that doesn't cost really a lot of money. It just takes somebody with a knowledge like myself to come in, work with you, understand your business, your operations, where your risks are, and help you start mitigating those risks at the low level. It could be that your contracts aren't strong enough legally. It could be your supply chain is too protracted and drawn out and is going to be affected by things like the Ukraine war or aviation being shut down for a week because of a volcano. You've got to look at everything. So organizational resilience is a huge part of security. Because as I've said, if things aren't a security problem, that they often develop as a security problem. So we work with companies holistically to look at where their exposures are, what might shut them down, and a lot of our clients massively benefit from that. Some of them want us to stay in our lane and be absolutely security driven, but risk exposure to a company, unless you really understand your business, can sideline you and shut you down very quickly. So we've got to be working with the clients to do what we can.
Seen a lot of foreign espionage, trying to get into British companies. We read about the Russians and the Chinese and everybody. Have you seen a lot of that?
Yeah, it hasn't gone away either. It's so a lot of people. So we work with a lot of customers who think that their company will never get affected or their sector will never get affected. So I mean, espionage is in every single sector. It's in sport, massively in sport because of the betting and organised crime. It's in agriculture, including GM crops. It's massively in that. There was a huge case in the States in relation to GM seeds. It's in obviously aviation. It's in, when I said about sport as well, I've lectured for 3 of the top Formula One teams in my time and done training with them on espionage, because if you take a Formula One vehicle, that's an upside down aeroplane. So they're developing technologies that can be used in aviation. They can be used in defense. You can make, with the same technology, you can make a missile. So they're working on strength. They're working on weight. They're working on really, really important factors that can be used in defense, and the material technology that they use. So often we find with customers, they don't necessarily understand the value of their intellectual property or the value of the information that they have got on a daily basis. Could be client information, but it could be intellectual property on things that they're working on. So, the Chinese threat, the Russian threat, the North Korean threat, it's massively out there. And, Gloucestershire's got its fair share of really big companies. You've got some companies that are working on high technology, but then you've also got companies that are involved in the energy sector, and they're working on tenders. They're working on critical national infrastructure. So there's lots of companies in Gloucestershire that are also very much at risk.
Not being funny, the defence industry is really heavily here, the aviation industry as well. And as you mentioned, Agitech is quite interesting as well. Well, just very interesting. What was the case about the GM seeds?
So the case about the GM seeds in the States was that there was I think it was a funding level for investing and to do with the university's trials over in the States, and all of a sudden they got some overseas people that took an interest, and they weren't from a country that would normally take a lot of interest in this type of thing. They were looking at funding this project, and the university did their due diligence, and it turned out to be Chinese money, and that was a big problem at the time. Obviously, I mean, I work with a few universities because I do lecturing at some of the best universities in the world. I'm actually lecturing at King's College in London next week on espionage. So I think that universities now they do a lot of due diligence for their partners, and obviously their investors and stuff as well. So it's I think we've come on a bit since then. A lot of organisations, do they know your client? They do, and they knuckle down now and try and find out where the money's coming from.
Let's do this. I know we're kind of running out of time already, unfortunately, but the big Chinese headquarters that they want to build in London, this massive office of theirs, what it was, it's embassy, the new brand new Chinese embassy on the banks of the Thames. What's your view on that? If you have a view on it.
I think it's fine. I mean, wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it, but you need to look at. There's a lot more stuff going on covertly around the world. There's secret Chinese police stations around. That's what they're called around the world. To try to shut down dissidents, and protests, and they're covertly acting against members of the public who protest against China, who are involved in things like the process around Tibet, Taiwan. So there's lots of stuff going on covertly. There's lots of buildings being procured covertly around the world. Russians especially. I know a country in Europe that's trying to deal with that at the moment. A lot of property being bought by overseas hedge funds, etc. So it's difficult. I mean, I think they're not the enemy. They are. Whilst there is a Cold War going on, we're not at war with them. So if they want to build a big embassy, that's absolutely fine. That's not going to change anything that they're doing covertly. So I would welcome diplomacy is where we need to be for sure.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I want to bring up because you're local as well, aren't you? Let me just bring up this other photograph if that's okay. Looks like a share here. Can you see that photograph of you as a young lad?
Yeah, there we are. So that's me at Eastington Primary School. So as a young boy, I went to Eastington Primary School near Stonehouse. That's where I spent my younger years, and a wonderful little school it was too.
Well, and you still live in the area as well. You still live in Gloucestershire, don't you?
Yeah, I'm still in Eastington. Yeah, I'm still here for now. Maybe in a few years I'll be living in Dubai, but we shall see.
I should say, well, I was going to ask you then, unfortunately, we are running out of time. What's your top three business tips? Before I start this, I'm sorry, I've forgotten. What's the book that you're reading at the moment, Alex? On the side of the bed.
I'm not actually reading any books at the moment. I'm actually listening to the Diary of a CEO. So I go for a 7 mile walk every morning, and that takes about 2 hours. So the Diary of a CEO is good for me. That's really good because it covers a whole wide range of subjects, and I really enjoy that. That's Stephen Bartlett is a very good host and asks some amazing questions. So I really do enjoy that, listening to that. It's good for business, it's good for that.
Yeah, no pressure on me now, Alex. Thanks ever so much, mate.
No pressure. You're brilliant. Don't worry.
We should take three business tips, please.
My top three business tips would be for business leaders to work on themselves and their own personal development, to listen, I think, and to try and understand the people that work for them, and also to not make a decision in haste. I think that would be probably my biggest thing is definitely don't make decisions in haste, especially not when you're angry or something's sidelined you and coming at you fast. You need to sometimes take a sit back and have a really good appreciation of what's going on. fully understand the situation and then start making decisions if you can. If not, you need to then make lots of small decisions that you can reverse out of if you need to.
Alex, fortunately, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks ever so much for talking to Punchline Talks. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be back again next week. But until then, it's all in the Punchline. Thank you very much. Bye.